The 14th Dalai Lama and the Anatomy of Politically Correct Buddhism, a multimedia presentation, Lesson 6, Part B, based upon Stephen's chapter in Westmont University Professor Ross, A Guide to New Religious Movements, published by InterVarsity Press in 2005. International recognition. How did the Dalai Lama rise to such a high level of worldwide acclaim? After his escape from Tibet, he concentrated on establishing a Tibetan government in exile in Dharamsala, India, and encouraged Tibetans to engage in nonviolent opposition to the communist occupation. During his second journey to the U.S. in July 1981, the Dalai Lama conducted a Kalachakra initiation ceremony at the Deer Park Buddhist Center in Madison, Wisconsin. Performed in the Year of the Iron Bird, this ceremony symbolically fulfilled an ancient prophecy by Padmasambhava in AD 745. When the iron eagle flies and horses run on wheels, the Tibetan people will be scattered over the earth and the Dharma will go to the land of the red man. After 30 years of exile in India, the Dalai Lama was invited to Sweden to receive the Nobel Peace Prize in 1989 for his non-violent efforts to resolve the Chinese armed occupation of Tibet. The Dalai Lama's tolerance is clearly pragmatic. It wouldn't be prudent for him to offend any of his hosts, be they Mormon, Catholic, or Hindu, and he skillfully avoids doing so. Here the Nobel Prize laureates, the Dalai Lama, playfully chokes the Archbishop Desmond Tutu left as they pose for a picture with the serving staff after a private VIP lunch at the University of Denver in 2006. After receiving the Nobel Prize, he declared the following year the International Year of Tibet, which was celebrated in schools, museums, and cities around the globe. Since then, the Dalai Lama's notoriety has dramatically increased. Meetings have been held all over the world in what has become one of the busiest speaking schedules of a major religious leader in history. In 1990, America welcomed 1,000 Tibetan refugees after the passage of the Tibetan Refugee Resettlement Act, sponsored by Representative Barney Frank of Massachusetts. In order to maintain the Tibetan community's cultural and religious cohesiveness, the Dalai Lama carefully thought through their resettlement in Los Angeles, Seattle, Minneapolis, and 13 other sites after experiencing the Tibetan diaspora's cultural deterioration in Switzerland. After studying persecuted Jews' pattern for survival, he purposely encouraged his followers to settle in cluster sites, complete with a resident Buddhist Lama, craftsmen, artisans, and families. In Chicago, Illinois, in 1893, religious leaders for the first time in history gathered together as a parliament of sorts to discuss their religious viewpoints. Church historian Philip Schaff and many notable Christians were in attendance, with the exception of Dwight L. Moody, the evangelist who may have been engaged in evangelical outreach at the Columbian World Exposition. 100 years later, immigrant religious leaders from Hindu, Buddhist, and Muslim backgrounds, along with liberal Christian leaders, initiated its centennial celebration. For 10 days in August 1993, the Palmer House Hilton in Chicago was buzzing as 6,000 delegates from a variety of religious backgrounds attended the centennial celebration of the Parliament of the World's Religions. The religious leader on whom all eyes were focused was the 14th Dalai Lama, the God King of Tibet, who emerged at the Parliament as a pluralist pope. Along with a small group of 10 evangelicals, I attended the meetings with 6,000 representatives. Another 6,000 were turned away. This time, the pastor of Moody Bible Church, Erwin Lutzer, was in attendance, faced with the challenge of educating his own congregation, who were asking him questions about how to witness to their co-workers and neighbors who now were Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, and Buddhists. Our media team focused on the seemingly simple question which we posed to delegates from a wide variety of religious backgrounds. For example, who is Jesus to you, a Buddhist? One of the journalists asked the Dalai Lama, "Have you studied the life and teachings of Jesus?" He replied, "I read a Bible translation in Tibet in the 1930s and 40s, a direct translation. I learned something from reading these books. Then I learned a deeper way through a personal friend, the late Thomas Merton, a Catholic monk." At the Parliament in Chicago, a closed meeting between Tibetan Buddhist monastics, led by the Dalai Lama, met with Catholic monastics. A fellow evangelical brother, Brendan Pelfrey, a gifted sculptor, after much prayer was able to present a bronze sculpture to him based upon Christ's love for the Tibetan people. Notice that the two Tibetan women worshipfully, one kneeling on the ground before Jesus Christ, whose hands and feet have been pierced for their sake. In a rare display of emotion, the Dalai Lama showed tears. Did Brendan's artistic representation of the Lord Jesus Christ's sacrifice for the Tibetan people touch some deep spiritual chord in his life? Or did it bring to remembrance the help many evangelical missionaries extended to his people during the early days of their diaspora? Meetings between the Dalai Lama and the Pope and extensive dialogue with Catholics revealed the desire of both parties to learn about and even assimilate one another's ideas, a process that fits very well within the parameters of the Buddhist doctrine of assimilation. The Vatican maintained a low profile on past visits by the Dalai Lama, including his last visit in 2003 to meet with John Paul II, to avoid a further chill in its icy relations with China. Recently, however, he met with the new Pope Benedict and was awarded an honorary doctorate by the Vatican. Now in any city the Dalai Lama visits, lights flash, reporters, keyboards churn out these standard lines and a general cry for Free Tibet. These can be heard in every newspaper, in every radio station, every television program. One moment the Dalai Lama seriously addresses human rights abuse in Tibet, and the next he exhibits a humorous curiosity that the public finds attractive. The oral cuisine he serves up with few variations is kindness, compassion, and world peace, with a twist of don't change the faith you're born with, be tolerant, and don't proselytize. Barbara Walters, after interviewing him, asked if she could kiss him. He acquiesced. David Woodward, a Christian scholar who has sympathetically followed the plight of Tibetans for the last 50 years, says of the Dalai Lama, quote, "It is, of course, ridiculous for him to criticize Christian witness when he himself is engaged in proselytizing Westerners," end of quote. The Dalai Lama's intent to proselytize was obvious to Tibet watchers during the spring of 2001, when 9,000 Oregon high schoolers were handpicked to attend one of his talks. He encouraged the youth to become ambassadors of peace and expounded on his text, which were required pre-reading. In 2008, 160,000 students and other participants did the same thing at a large conference called Seeds of Compassion in Seattle, Washington, with the Dalai Lama. Today's Gandhi in scarlet and crimson robes.